All right. Hi, everybody. It's our CFB Talk 117. My name is Bob Kyrie. It's Tuesday night. We love hearing from you and talking about what's going on in college football. I'm going to be joined by my regular co host, JD Moore, who's going to be here in a moment. Obviously, the tragic, major news is the passing of Mike Leach. And I know all of us here at RCFB are extremely sad to hear. It was completely unexpected. He was one of the most influential and most interesting people. And interesting, I think, is what describes him equally, as well as being obviously someone who helped develop the spread offense system and air raid and all of that and popularized it. So, as we get ready, I'm going to be joined by my co host, JD. If you'd like to join us and be part of the conversation, we'd love to hear from you. You can go ahead and hit request. We actually, one thing I just wanted to mention, one of the positive memories we have a lot of positive memories of Mike Leach, is he did a pair of AMAs, gosh, ages ago, where he came to our CFB and he answered questions in a Q&A format. 10 years ago and 8 years ago, he joined us, and that was two of the most interesting AMAs we'd ever hosted. Both of the times he was with Washington State, and he absolutely answered every question thrown at him. In fact, my favorite story about Mike Leach in the two times he came on and did an AMA was that the first time, he came, he did exactly what you expect. He answered a lot of interesting questions, a lot of interesting takes. He talked about the fact that he had just co-edited a book called Sports for Dorks. He was talking about, obviously he had written Swing Your Sword. There was a lot going on there. Then a few years later, there were some groups, and I don't blame them. Some folks were like, that was a neat AMA a few years ago, but he wasn't really talking about football. He's one of the geniuses especially on offense. So let's get together and develop some interesting questions to ask Mike Leach. So this group of members of our community sat together. They created a separate conversation thread and came up with some really well thought out, in-depth questions that weren't too complicated so that, someone could easily answer in a reply. Started populating the post with these questions from Mike Leach. And this is what I love. Mike Leach, honestly, he's just a guy who he'd just like to have fun in these moments. We actually skipped over all of these strategy questions and went right to the stuff that you kind of enjoy hearing from him, and just moments where he could kind of talk about the tradition and the culture. I still remember, talking about how waving the flag was such one of those great traditions at Wazoo, asking about, how does he recruit? He said, the one thing I will never do to recruit is lie to them. I'll be straightforward. They've got to be able to enjoy. If they come play for me, they've got to be able to get that experience. And obviously playing for Mike Leach is a unique experience. His coaching tree, we all know how spread it is all across America, across the college football, NFL. Many of his disciples are out there. But again, I want to welcome you to hit request if there's any topic you'd like to talk about. There's a lot going on beyond that. And I know that's the big story of the day, but we'd still love to just talk about anything in college football. I mean, we've got bowls coming up. Let's not forget that. There's a lot of interesting ones. Just yesterday, we had a good conversation with the executive director of the LA Bowl, which is one of those coming up, aka the Jimmy Kimmel LA Bowl. It was interesting too, because he was also the managing director of SoFi Stadium and the Hollywood Park Development, which is, of course, hosting the national championship this next month as well. So it was kind of an interesting, wide-ranging conversation about the logistics going into it. In my own life, gosh, 22 years ago, I had done a major event at an arena. So I know it's interesting to do these kinds of large-scale events, anything like, in their case, they just hosted the Super Bowl. So that, I think, helps them a bit as they're getting ready to host the College Football National Championship. And then they're already having I loved hearing that. They're already having a lot of meetings getting ready for 2028 when they host the Olympics. JD, I know you've finally been able to make it up. What's up?
Yes. Thank you for the patience. It is a really sad day in college football, losing an incredible voice to college football, concept artist in college football, in losing Mike Leach today. Our thoughts are certainly with his family, with Mississippi State, with the fans of the Bulldogs, and everybody who has ever enjoyed an air raid offense or any of the concepts that have come out of that. I'm going to make my one giant stance of, any college football Hall of Fame that does not recognize Mike Leach as being one of the most influential coaches in the game is not a Hall of Fame at all. And the fact that, they're going to have this, I think it's a 600 percent winning percentage in order for them to recognize a head coach in the Hall of Fame. If there's ever to be an exception, it needs to be Mike Leach. I'm very excited for this upcoming bowl season. I'm very excited for the football that is going to be played for the remainder of this postseason. But my heart is heavy today. We've lost a titan in college football, and not just in college football, but football at large. So my thoughts, again, they are with the Leaches. They are with the Mississippi State fans, and it's a hard day today. It's a hard day today, but there's plenty of football to be played, and I'm excited to talk about that.
Absolutely. And Zach, you were the first person. We'd love to talk to you. What's going on?
Hey guys, big fan of the subreddit. Average lurker, sometimes comment every now and then. I just got back. I'm a current Mississippi State student. I'm still on campus during the break, and I just got back from the memorial they had set up on the right outside the gate to the football stadium. They got his name and year of his birth and death on the big screen. Like, they got this table out there with the flowers and various Halloween candies from his interviews that he.
You muted on us for a second there. I think there was a bit of a. So you're saying, I'm sorry, did you say they had Halloween candy?
Yeah, they had Halloween candy out there for like some, various interviews. He said his favorite Halloween candies that they got some like gummy bears out there, some nerds and things like that, like flowers just set up. It was very well thought out. There were people just like stopping and, dropping things down. It was really touching to see like the atmosphere in that just area was just really heavy and just somber. I was I was in the Maroon band this year also, and I got the chance to hear him speak at our band camp. He took 30 minutes to an hour out of his day, practicing hard work with his team to come out to talk to us, and he didn't have to do that. Most college football coaches don't go out and talk to the band, but he did. And he was talking to us about how he enjoyed watching us practice and how we were, working just as hard, if not harder, than his football players out there. And one of the stories he told, someone asked him a question about his pregame ritual, and he just says he doesn't really do many superstitious stuff, but one thing he won't do is try on a new belt. So like they'll give all the coaches and staff, new clothes or whatever, like merchandise. And sometimes they'll include belts, but he would never want to put on a new belt because he didn't want to like break it in. So he would just keep the same belt. And once that belt, runs out or like wears out, he just buys a new one. So I thought that was pretty interesting. It was a fun time to hear him talk and go on about various things.
Absolutely. That's and could you tell us more about that memorial service you went to? I mean, I love the fact that they honored the things he likes with things like gummy bears and the candies he enjoyed. But what else happened? I mean, it's interesting to hear it from someone like yourself who's been there and on the ground.
Yeah, so it wasn't really much of a service. They just have like these tables set out outside of the gate with like these black ribbons attached to the gate. And people are, dropping flowers and things like that, writing notes. Like I remember there was a note on a ribbon that said "All dogs go to heaven." It was spelled DAWGS. And throughout his career at Washington State and Texas Tech and here in Starkville, he listed various Halloween candies, like the gummy bears and the nerds. And so they were full giant bags of the candies that people had just like placed on the tables as like sort of like a tribute to him. And it was such a nice thing to see that there were cars driving by, and then parking, putting their emergency lights on, walking over, placing their items down and like having a moment to honor the life of the coach. And so it's just this whole community is just saddened, but also, we appreciate the support from across the country for just the way this coach just embodied this university and like the way we operate as a community.
Absolutely. And that sounds like a good way to honor his life and at the same time move forward. As you know, all of our hearts go out to everyone at Mississippi State, as well as all of the teams that he touched. And I know there are a lot of big fans everywhere: Wazoo, Texas Tech. And, as we all know, he's been in many other places. Some of the stories about being at Valdosta State, Iowa Wesleyan, Cal Poly, he even coached in Finland that one year. I always found it interesting that he got his JD. He went to Pepperdine for law school after undergrad at BYU, and then just never practiced. He got a degree from the U.S. Sports Academy and jumped right in to coaching, and it worked. So, oh man, that's living the dream right there for a lot of people who've made the mistake of going to law school, myself, maybe included. So, but Zach, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciated hearing from you.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you. Hey, Jackson, you've been patient. What's up?
What's up, guys? So, first off, this whole Mike Leach situation is horrible. And I want to preface this as a joke, by the way, before I say it. And this is not about Mike Leach. How much money are you paid, Reddit, to promote Kansas football? Because as a Missouri fan, it's tough. We get dogged on this app. What is the infatuation with Kansas? Because us Missouri fans, we have to go through enough, okay? I've watched Michael Porter Jr. get injured in 2 minutes in basketball. I've watched our football program in shambles ever since the age of 5. I'm depressed. Please just tell me.
First of all, we sympathize. And I think, gosh, Kansas has been the Cinderella story of this year, so it's kind of hard not to see a little bit of fun with that particular story. And we actually were kind of rooting for Mizzou because we had a lot of good Mizzou fans join us, especially in the offseason. We were all curious to see how Drink was going to do. And, that season was kind of uneven. There were moments we were like, you remember what it was like. So many of those close moments. And we enjoyed Mizzou fans. One of my favorite, there's this guy, and I don't know if you've seen the work he does, but he does the Southern End Zone Skee Ball Challenge, where I guess, for those who are unfamiliar, they did this nice Southern End Zone development at the stadium at Mizzou Faroe Field. And it doesn't have a net, so the ball just goes wherever. And it kind of, when you look at it long enough, resembles skee ball, where there's places the football could go. And this dude, he goes to every home game, and he tracks where the ball lands, and he assigns points. And it's just like what you'd expect with skee ball. Like the hard to hit, left and right bottom corners are worth like a lot of points, and then the higher up ones are the traditional kind of scaling points. And I've loved that for year after year. And this year I decided to finally get that thing out there on the Twitter, because it was on the Twitter. God, I sound old, but it was,
I'll tell you,
it was something though. But that said, I acknowledge there are a number of us who co-run this Twitter account, and one of them is a Kansas fan. But hey, at the same time, we know exactly how to cut ourselves, because I'm also a USC fan. So when we both go both ways on the Trojans, and with the Kansas, we have absolutely stabbed them in the heart when Les Miles was there a couple of times. So it's cyclical. I promise.
No, and I'll say this. Eli Drinkwitz. I'm not going to get into how I feel about him personally. I will say he doesn't do himself a lot of favors all the time, especially with some of the things he does, like showing up at the Kansas basketball game with a sign. I
thought that was hilarious. I genuinely thought that was hilarious.
But a lot of people overreact to do it. They're like, "Oh my gosh, look at this!" Like, what?
No, we're not. I gotta say, I don't. If we feel that, if we've ever made it sound that way, we're not. That's definitely no. We love silliness. That's what if there's silliness in the sport, we love it. I still remember my favorite Jayhawk thing that we were one of the people that spread the fact that Coastal Carolina was beating up a Jayhawk piñata each time they were beating them. So that was one of our. Probably one of our.
You want to know something funny? I'll leave it off on one thing. So I don't know if you watch college basketball much, but I will say I went to the Border War game at Mizzou, and I'll say this: that was the most hype I've seen Mizzou Arena in 10 years. And we ended up hanging a stuffed Jayhawk on a lamppost. It was the greatest thing I've ever been a part of. But I will say that after the game, it felt like I had just been kicked in the balls 20 times. Because usually I wake up every morning and I ask God why he hates me, because he made me choose Mizzou fandom. But yeah, that's all I got to say.
Oh, yeah. That's what makes college rivalries so fun. I still remember they ended it, but USC used to do something similar with Bruin, giant stuffed Bruin. But thanks for joining us. It was good hearing from you, man. And thanks for keeping us in check, too.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for letting me talk.
Yes, absolutely. We always appreciate you coming on. Whether it's Kansas, Mizzou, or anywhere else in the country, we always appreciate hearing from all callers from across the country. And, I see we do have a special guest who's coming up, Ross Dellenger from SI. He's from Sports Illustrated. We've had him on the show before. And Ross, really appreciate you coming on board. Obviously today, sad day in college football with Mike Leach. Finally leaving this plane. But as a man who has had dinner with this man, who has covered Mike Leach for so long, I would love to hear you regale a tale or two of the Pirate in the way that you knew him best.
Yeah, good to be on with you guys. It's been a long, kind of sad 2 or 3 days. But at the same time, I think the outpouring of stories that you hear about Mike Leach and his life and career kind of bring a smile to your face and make you chuckle. And so there's a little bit of light during a dark time. But I'll go back to the dinner that my wife and I had with Leach and his wife. It happened in December 2020, so right at 2 years ago. My wife is a political reporter. At the time, she actually was a White House correspondent. And Mike Leach knew that. I had met him, a year or two before, and he knew that she was a political reporter and had been interested in meeting her because he is big, as we all know, in politics and very interested in it. So he was very interested in meeting her. So when we drove through Starkville on the way to the Gulf Coast, which is where I'm from, for Christmas, I texted Mike, and a few hours later, we were in Harvey's restaurant in Starkville, across from him and his wife. And we spent the next 8 hours with them. There's no short conversation with Mike Leach. And this one basically lasted for 8 hours. We had dinner. We had quite a bit to drink. And then we went back to him and his wife's place. And talked more and drank more, and it was a great night. There's some little anecdotes about that night that I recall. One of them is Mike, again, pretty big drinker, and he was probably 5 or 6 Crown and Waters in, and the server came by to ask if he needed another one, and he said, "Honey, bring me 2, so I'll save you the trip." So the next time she brought him 2 Crown and Waters. And then at one point, and few people know this, but Mike Leach is Mormon, was raised Mormon, went to BYU, was out from Wyoming. And my wife learned this during the dinner and was pretty shocked by it, as Mike Leach doesn't necessarily abide by a whole lot of what you might call, Mormon policies, I guess. And learning this, she had her shocked face on as Mike told her that he was Mormon. And he said something like, "Oh, you're surprised?" And she said, "Yes, you're Mormon." And he took both of his cocktail drinks, raised them up high, and said, "Hey, I never said I was perfect." So it was a fun night. And Mike really was just a great guy to get to know for the last few years and talk to. The most unique coach, and I say this a lot, and I'm not just saying this because we're talking about him now, but people ask me and a lot about because I spend a lot of time around coaches, and who's your favorite coach? I get asked a lot, or who's the most interesting? Who are the greatest storytellers? Blah blah blah. And there's always 2 that I mention. It's always Mike Leach and Dana Holgorsen, because they are so different from any other coaches. And coincidentally enough, they're very good friends from the same air raid tree. And so there's no one quite like Mike Leach. I talked to Pat Chun, the Washington State AD, today for a series of stories about Mike off the field that will hopefully publish tomorrow, kind of like vignettes on little stories from people talking about Mike. And, Pat Chun kind of said it best. There would never be another Mike Leach. And There will not. Never met anybody like him. Probably never will.
Absolutely. I mean, again, for a guy who had never played a down of college football, who got a law degree and was a man who almost always found a way to, I don't know if you would describe it as win every press conference, but make sure that every press conference was interesting. To know a man of that much character and of that much intrigue, we're never going to see anything like that again in college football. Every time that man spoke, it was always a fresh breath of air. It was always a tangent that you never knew where he was going to go to. And of course, the football teams that he coached were absolutely insanely fun. I mean, one of the favorite stats that I've seen today was the fact of, I think it was 7 different times Mike Leach coached a quarterback who threw for 600 yards in a game. And the fact that it was done 7 different times with 7 different quarterbacks. I mean, that's just an absurd stat that I don't think we're ever going to see in college football again. I mean, when you look at the entire pantheon of Mike Leach's career, what's the most impressive thing that you look back on the field and go, I can't believe he pulled that off?
Well, I don't know if it's anything specific on the field as much as you look at his record and where he's been. He's been a head coach for 21 seasons. 13 of the 21 seasons, he won 8 games. His teams have won 8 games or more. And he's done it at 3 places that historically, don't have a lot of football success and rich history and all this stuff. And they're not blue bloods. They're in remote locations: Lubbock, Texas; Pullman, Washington; Starkville, Mississippi. And he still succeeded. And he never really wavered or changed. Dana Holgerson told me one time that Mike Leach was the last person out there, the last coach out there running the true air raid. Everybody else had abandoned it or had changed it or tweaked it. He never really did. He ran the same thing. He only had like a handful of plays, like 8 to 10 plays or so that he ran in different formations and a little bit tweaked here and there. But he was the last one, to kind of run the true air raid. There is a stat that my colleague Pat Forty found, and I think it's pretty interesting. Mike Leach coach team has led the nation in pass attempts for 11 straight seasons, counting this year. So again, he never changed, right? He always said that running the ball in time of possession was the most overrated statistic in sports, and he stuck to it. And lo and behold, nobody really figured him out that much. I mean, this year he goes 8-4. So it really is truly incredible over such a long period, using basically the same system that he was able to have so much success.
No question. I mean, again, when you talk about the plays that he would keep in his playbook, I think one of my favorite interviews I ever did was after that Alamo Bowl, when Washington State played Iowa State, ended up winning. I think that score was something like 27-24. But when you started to talk to Gardner Minshew, he was talking about, they had to burn something like 5 minutes off the clock in the fourth quarter, and he's just drawing up play after play after play that's a passing play to try to burn up clock. And only Mike Leach would be a offensive genius who would be able to pull that off in a way that, you're going to try to kill clock by just throwing screens, by throwing little 3-and-outs, just not even looking at the opportunity of give the ball straight back to your running back. I mean, there were stories of his previous quarterbacks like Luke Falk being told to go out and start with ace back as his play and then have to go up to the line of scrimmage and call an audible. And then you'd even have situations where if you were going to take a knee in a Mike Leach offense, you were taking that out of the shotgun. If you were going to do any type of play, even a quarterback sneak, you were very rarely doing anything that was directly behind center, because that's the way that Mike Leach operated. And I think, again, just to your original point, we're never going to see that type of ingenuity again in college football to revolutionize not just modern college football, but concepts that we now see in high school, concepts that we now see in the NFL. I think there's no way to really truly emphasize how important Mike Leach was to the game of football.
No, there's not. I see that Ralph Russo is on the call. I think before the season, Ralph with the AP, he did a story on how the air raid still lingers in every little facet of football down to high school level. And I think he talked to Mike Leach about it and how mummy and everything. And he, I am more interested a lot in Mike's off the field and how he was. In tomorrow, I have these little stories about him off the field, but on the field, he was arguably the most impactful coach to college football offense, or maybe offense in general, in the last 30 years, 25 to 30 years. So pretty incredible. But thanks for giving the platform, guys. Good to talk to you.
Absolutely, Ross. We always enjoy hearing from you. So let's see here. David, you've been really patient. Going to let you up real quick. And again, if you'd like to join us here, we always love hearing from you in the audience. Just hit request and we'll make sure to get you up here. David, what's up?
Hey, what's up, man? First off, I just want to offer my condolences to the Mississippi State fans in this chat, and also to Mississippi State fans everywhere. College football got a little worse now that Mike Leach isn't in it anymore, and I don't have a lot to say, but I will say that if there's any one word that you could use to describe Coach Leach, it's real. I mean, the man never hid who he was. He was always genuine, and what you saw out of Mike Leach was what you got. And when I think of there's some coaches out there where I would want to drink a beer, smoke a cigar with, and Mike Leach is definitely one of those coaches. Matter of fact, he's got to be number one for me, just because of how he made life so interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no kidding on that. I mean, just to hear the man speak on so many different subjects. I mean, this is a guy where, there are so many anecdotes of. Sorry, I'm just laughing because I'm thinking of that story of, he goes out and he's just trying to walk back from practice when he's at Oklahoma. And some guy says, "Hey, I'll give you a ride if you want." And he goes, "Absolutely. I'm not going to walk this 1 mile that I have to go." And he ends up having an hour and a half conversation just about anything that Mike Leach wants to talk about, whether it's pirates or history or warfare. And then 25 years later, his son is now wanting to talk to Mike Leach for a different story. And, Mike Leach is the one who brings up, "And by the way, thank your dad for that ride." And he goes on the same tangent that he did way back when. I mean, this was one of the greatest characters in college football history, and his ability to just be able to go off script for so long and into such a deep subject, whatever that subject would be. I think that's one of the incredible arts that we're never going to see from somebody else. Like, could you imagine, for example, like a Kirby Smart coming out and just being able to talk about, Hamilton, the Conqueror, or anything else from like the ancient Greeks or the ancient Romans, or any kind of warfare from around the world in any history, just at any random press conference, and go on for an hour and be able to captivate everybody that's listening? I mean, that's something that we're never going to see from any other coach in college football history, and we've lost a national treasure today because of that.
Absolutely. And just one last point I want to add. Out of all of Mike Leach's rants, my favorite one by far is if you go to YouTube and you search the Washington State Cougar Athletics official YouTube channel, and they have a video titled "Mike Leach on Weddings." Hands down, my favorite Mike Leach rant ever. Like, I die. Sorry, that was in bad taste, but I laugh every time I hear it.
And yeah, he absolutely had a way with words, and listening to his thoughts unvarnished in the best possible way was what made him an absolute delight. So we'll have to check that one out again. Thanks so much, David. It was great hearing from you.
Thank you.
Hey, Nick, you've been patient. What's up?
Hi there. Yeah, I got a Mike Leach story to share. I was lucky enough to be a student at Washington State University during his coaching tenure there. And one morning on my way to classes, I normally took the stairs, but that day I was just super tired, and I decided to take the elevator and push the button. And the elevator doors opened, and there was one man standing in the elevator, and that was Coach Leach. And I was starstruck. I had hundreds of questions. Big football fan that I would have wanted to ask him, but I couldn't muster up the courage to break the silence. And Coach Leach looked over at me, and he's like, "Hey, you like breakfast? You look like you like breakfast." And I was like, "Yeah, Coach, I like breakfast." He proceeded to then give me the perfect omelet that he makes for himself every morning. And gave me the list of ingredients on what he puts in his omelets and what he doesn't like in there. And as soon as he was done sharing his omelet, the elevator doors opened, and he took a few steps out, turned around and said, "Swing your sword, kid." And I said, "Thanks, Coach, I will." And that 20 seconds or, half of a minute that he shared with me just kind of embodies the kind of person he was. He didn't have to reach out or share anything. He could have just sat inside or stood in silence while he took his elevator ride to work that morning, but he decided to be kind and to share that with me, and I'll never forget him.
All right, Nick, I love that anecdote, but I also need to know, you can't tell us that Mike Leach gave you his daily omelet recipe and not share it with the rest of the class. What did Mike Leach love in his omelet?
He told me the recipe for a perfect omelet: 2 eggs, diced green pepper, onions, some diced ham. And he said he made it a point to say no mushrooms. Mushrooms will ruin the omelet if you put them in there, so don't put mushrooms in there. And then obviously some cheddar cheese, and that was Coach's perfect omelet right there.
Absolutely outstanding.
Absolutely. Well, Nick, thank you for joining us. And let's see here, Hob, I know you tried to join earlier and it kicked you off, but we're going to get you back on. No problem. Before we get to it, I have to say one of my favorite sort of stories kind of crossing with Mike Leach, because again, he'd done a couple of AMAs on RCFB back when he was at Wazoo. And he taught that class insurgent warfare and football strategy. And during class, one of the theories he put out there was be prepared to, and I'm actually reading one of the tweets from this class, and I'll share it in the replies, but be prepared to discuss whether Reddit CFB message boards could be utilized as a medium for deception operations, which we were flattered to think that we could be used for a PSYOP operation. But that's just Mike Leach for you. We love it. But I'll drop just as proof, I'll drop that in the replies. Let me see here. Oh, it looks like Hob got dropped again. Sometimes that happens. We'll get to you again, Hob, we promise. Let's see here. Gosh, Ralph, if you want to join us, I sent you an invite, and I also sent an invite to Shaw. Shaw, what's up?
Hey, yeah, I back in like 2018, it was kind of a state. I'm a state football guy. State started kind of like under Joe Moorhead. We could see kind of the wheels start to fall off, and it just sort of happened where a group of my friends and I, like all at the same time, like started watching Washington State, following them, like seeing how much fun everyone was having in Pullman, which is like the West Coast version of Starkville, even down to like selling cheese and, the dogs and all that. We all started following Washington State kind of sarcastically, but then like got really into it, and especially helped, with Gardner Minshew, who's like a Mississippian at quarterback. And so like when he like came to Starkville, it was like surreal. It was kind of crazy to like have this whole world merge. And I guess just like if I could say anything about him that's just always fascinated me is that he's never bored. He's never once not had something stewing in his brain and not wanted you to be a part of it. He will always invite you into his world and share like what his inner thoughts are. And it's always something really, I don't know, it's really unique. And he always knew how to fill those spaces. And so hopefully, I don't know, that's just something going forward that I think, we could all like strive to be more like.
Absolutely. We really appreciate that, Sean. Thank you so much for, Shaw. Sorry, Shaw. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks.
Well, I see we have another special guest, our friend Ralph Russo. How are you doing?
Hey guys, can you hear me okay?
Sure can.
Yeah, thanks. I saw Ross on here and was compelled to see what he had to say. And since he shouted me out, I guess I felt compelled to to come on and talk to you guys tonight. I hope you're all doing well. It's a bit of a sad day, but I think a lot of us like Ross and I sort of rode our way through it, right? We worked our way through a sad day in college football.
On a positive, just sort of to kind of, because we want to celebrate, obviously, Coach Leach as much as more than his passing. What was your first interaction with Coach?
I got to know him when he first was out of coaching for a little bit after he got fired from Texas Tech, and he wrote a book and he was sort of doing a little tour for it. He came into New York, and I remember meeting him somewhere in Midtown for lunch. And, I think like a lot of people, it's a similar story, right? You meet him and you think, oh, this is going to be a lot about talking about him and me asking the questions, because that's the way this relationship usually works between reporter and people we cover. And instead, it was a lot of him asking about me. Where'd you go to school? Why'd you take up journalism? Where'd you grow up? Oh, you're a New Yorker. Oh, you live in Brooklyn. It just constantly, he really was interested in people. I think, I tweeted this earlier today. He was an interesting person. Like, you could dive into a lot of different aspects of his personality, and he was interested in people. And I think he was far from a perfect person. He had his flaws, but like those are two things that I think we could all like sort of aspire to be an interesting person and be interested in other people. And that was, my first interaction with him. And other than the fact that for years he thought I worked for the New York Times, like I wasn't super close to him. But like a lot of reporters, every time you'd see him, you'd catch up, you'd tweet, I would text him every once in a while, call him every once in a while. Again, he had a similar relationship with a lot of reporters. And in some ways I almost felt like I lost track of him a little bit, but I did go to see him in the spring. And now I'm kind of happy that I did. During this last spring, I did a little bit of a tour of SEC schools, stopped in Starkville, hung around with him, talked more football with him than I think I had ever talked before, because I was working on a story about the air raid, and spent like half an hour with him, just sort of bullshitting and having a good time, and then he set me off with a styrofoam container full of barbecue, because I had to go back to Jackson to catch a plane in the morning.
I think one of the other things that I've always loved about Mike Leach, and I don't know who originally said this, so don't kill the messenger on this one, but the one thing that I've loved, at least in this sentiment, is that he was a man who craved connection, and he always sought to be connected to other people, and that's what made him such an incredible coach. And from every single story that you've heard from every single reporter, every single person who was around him, it did not matter who you were as a person. Mike Leach loved other people and connecting to other people by just talking with them, learning about them. And it seems like it definitely had that same connection with you as well.
Yeah, again, it's just, I think of something that Hal Mummy quoted him in a story today. My colleague actually was the one who did the interview. We had a couple of reporters working on it today. And, he mentioned how kind conversations with Leach could be like a balloon in the wind, like just sort of drifting here and there. But as a coach, and when he was studying something or working on something, he had an incredible focus, and he could break things down into very, compartmentalized, and was able to get his players to focus. Which again, like if you know Leach, you find yourself thinking like, like this guy is all over the place, right? He is just a tangent on top of a tangent. But in coaching settings, he could be very focused and get his players to focus. And that was sort of his genius.
Absolutely. And I think one other thing that is so important about Mike Leach's legacy is a story that you even wrote about him earlier today about the incredible coaching tree that he leaves behind. I mean, guys like Lincoln Riley, all the way down to your Seth Luttrells, to your Wes Welkers in the NFL. I mean, if you start looking at this tree, it is one of the largest trees in college football history. What's the impact that Mike Leach leaves with this coaching tree?
Yeah, I mean, think of Sonny Dykes, Lincoln Riley, Dana Holgerson, Sonny Cumbie at Louisiana Tech, Neil Brown at West Virginia. And what was interesting happened today. Eric Morris, who played wide receiver for Leach at Texas Tech and coached for him a little bit at Washington State, and was now currently the Washington State offensive coordinator after a little stint at Incarnate Word, got the North Texas job. So on the day Mike Leach died, another one of his guys became a head football coach, and that, I imagine that it was quite an odd day for Eric. Sort of an emotional day. You have this amazing, accomplishment in your life on a day you lose somebody who was close to you. I remember talking to Eric about this air raid story I did early in the year. And he would talk about how, at some point we had so few plays, you'd almost get bored running the same route every time, like over and over and over the same play over and over and over in practice. And we would occasionally suggest to him like, hey, maybe we can do this or maybe we can do that. And Leach would just kind of look at them like, who's the coach here? Like, we're going to do things my way. So yeah, another addition to that tree. So here's the one thing I just want to end on, if you don't mind. So again, like Leach, definitely not a perfect person. He could be really stubborn. He could be pretty tough on his players. He could butt heads with media. He didn't necessarily love to be questioned in certain situations. But again, none of us are perfect. But somebody who worked for him, a guy named Dave Emmerich, worked for him for a long time. He was like chief of staff, both at all of Texas Tech, Washington State, and at Mississippi State, but he recently finally moved away from working with Leach and went to work for Lincoln Riley at USC. So Dave's been with Leach for a real long time, and I'm going to send you a text message. I'm going to read. I'll try to read all of it. It's a little lengthy, but I feel like it's worthwhile because I think he gave people a glimpse of like the Mike Leach that the cameras didn't catch. So if you bear with me, I think the biggest thing, this is from Dave Emmerich, I think the biggest thing that I want people to know is how much he cared. If he learned of anyone down on their luck or having a hard time in life, he would call and check in with them. He would send videos for people who were sick and needing a little pick-me-up. He would send gear and autographs to kids that just had lost one of their parents or had a tough illness they were going through. He would invite people to practice that needed a pick-me-up in life. He would spend time with people and show a genuine interest in their lives. He gave tickets to people going through hard times. He really went out of his way to touch people that didn't have a lot of good going on in their lives. Coach had a reputation for being a hard ass, but he cared about so many people and gave them something to look forward to. He was a good man. So I just wanted to share that. Again, everybody's got imperfections in life. I'm not saying Mike Leach was a perfect person, but he had a lot of different facets of his personality.
Absolutely. Ralph, thank you so much for sharing that text message and a couple of stories about the pirate himself. We're looking forward to reading more stories as we continue to remember and celebrate the life of Mike Leach and the impact that he's had on this sport.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Let's see here. FL Gator 51, what's going on?
I mean, if you want to talk about America's coach, I mean, Coach Leach just embodies everything that you would think to just be American. I mean, he's Americans' college football coach.
Yeah, he absolutely embodied so much of being independent, being willing to speak his mind, and at the same time never really to stand up for himself, and has these wonderful anecdotes. I mean, hearing from I think it was Nate earlier about that wonderful moment, with the omelet, and hearing the things that both Ross and Ralph shared here, it's been striking. And so that balance between being such a person who obviously developed and is focused and really grew football it took football in a direction that a lot of us take for granted now, as well as building that foundation, that coaching tree, and just being genuinely interesting, being a man of all a jack of all trades, a man of the world. I mean, he really should have been if they kept that one old bear campaign going, he was the most interesting man in the world in so many ways.
Definitely. Sad day.
Sad day, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us and giving us your thoughts. We have a lot of people. Wow. Let's see here. Hob, we're going to give you another try. Let's see if we got this one. Hob, we got you up here? Oh, man. Just a bad luck right now with you, Hob. We promise we'll get you up here. Let's see here. Oh my goodness, we got the mic monster today, JD. Looks like we've got a bit
Listen, if it's the mic monster, if it's Elon's newest product rolling out, I don't know what it is. But listen, as we still try to connect all of y'all up on here, we want to hear from as many people as we can. One of the other things that I do want to at least comment on is, we always talk about, the great coaching trees and some of the incredible coaching staffs that some people have put out before. I mean, I think one of the most iconic ones has to be Hayden Fry's 1983 Iowa team, where he's got Bob Stoops and Bill Snyder and all these other giants on his assistant coaching staff. I just want to run down really quickly the incredible team that Mike Leach had together on the 2002 Texas Tech Red Raiders. As players, you've got future quarterback, or not just future quarterback, but future head coach of Oklahoma and USC, Lincoln Riley. You have future Texas Tech head coach Cliff Kingsbury. You have future NFL assistant Wes Welker on there. You have future Louisiana Tech head coach Sonny Dykes on the scout team. You have on the assistant roster future Cal and TCU and SMU head coach Sonny Dykes as your wide receivers coach. You have future Baylor and Houston head coach Art Briles. You have so many different guys who are involved in this. I mean, Greg McIntyre, future Hawaii head coach, is the defensive coordinator. Dave Aranda, head coach at Baylor, who just won the Big 12 championship last year, was a GA on this team. This is going to be one of those teams that when you start to look back and go, this was the cradle of an absurd amount of coaching talent, that 2002 Texas Tech Red Raiders team is going to go down as history, one of the greatest ones in this century.
Absolutely. Hey, Hob, it looks like we got you up here. What's going on?
Can you hear me, guys? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. I knew patience would work.
Thank you. I'm so sorry for the connection issues.
Don't worry. We've run into it. We've run into it even with our co-host. Sirius is probably the most notorious, where we'll be halfway through the show and he's like, I'm still trying to connect, guys. So don't worry about it. It happens. We totally get it.
Well, first and foremost, I appreciate y'all letting me speak. Secondly, I want to express my condolences to Coach Leach, his family, his former teammates, players, current players, and all of his former coaches and current coaches as well. Growing up from afar as a West Virginia fan, Mike Leach has always been my all-time favorite coach, and not just college sports, but in general. I don't think you'll ever find a more unique character when it comes to coaching than Mike Leach himself. But much like everyone else alluded to this evening, is that he was 1010% real about everything he said. he's genuinely a rare coach that, sure, he might come off as a hard ass, but like he'll sit there and talk to you 1 minute about the intricacies of the air raid offense, and then sit there and turn around and talk to you about like, Atlantis or something like that. And I just think you don't find that much less in college, or much less in professional sports, but any sports in general. And I'm going to miss Mike Leach. He was always a great soundbite. My favorite memory of Mike Leach is obviously the first time I became really, really popular with him and knew who he was after Texas Tech knocked off Texas in 2008. And that was nuts. I remember watching it live. I knew who Mike Leach was, but I didn't really understand who he was. I know he kind of got screwed at Texas Tech, and I was in high school when that happened. And then he did what he did at Washington State. And then I remember a few years ago, the SEC came calling, and then you had some haters, but I was very happy for him. I wanted him to go be successful in the SEC, and he made Mississippi State somewhat relevant. I mean, they were making bowl games and winning games. So all this whole like his air raid can't compete in the SEC, it sure did. So rest in peace, Coach Leach. Leach, one of the greatest men on the planet, but also just one of the greatest coaches and most real people that I think you'll ever experience in sports. And I'm going to miss him. Everyone else is going to miss him. God bless Coach Leach and his family. God bless Mississippi State Bulldogs, Texas Tech fans, Washington State fans, all y'all. And God bless everyone that really liked Coach Leach like I did. So thank you.
That was great, Hob. Thank you so much. And I think a lot of folks listening, a lot of the folks we've had on earlier, share a lot of your sentiments. And he was a force. He was a delight. He definitely was always interesting, and always what you saw was what you got. There was no facade there. He was absolutely authentic to who he was. And I think that's part of what drew so many people to him, not only fans, but players and people who wanted to play for him.
Also, one last anecdote I'd like to point out, because I'm not going to say it, but my favorite speech he ever did or whatever is I encourage everyone to go to YouTube, like one gentleman said. We're going to talk about Leach memories, and go to the 2009 post Baylor game. I think they won that game too, but it was the year after they went 10-2. I've never seen a coach just absolutely take a mask on his team that actually probably deserved it like that. But yeah, there was a lot of cuss words, but it actually wasn't that disrespectful. But in the words of the late, great Coach Leach, all poo pew effing Baylor, F you and F me and F everybody. Rest in peace.
Thanks again, Hob. It was great hearing from you. Let's see here. Andrew, you've been really patient. What's up? We'd love to hear from you.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Pretty good.
Excellent.
All right, so sort of a couple points that I wanted to touch on. First of all, I'll mention, I'm a younger guy, so I haven't had the opportunity to sort of watch a lot of Coach Leach on the field. A lot of my experience, or a lot of my knowledge of him, truly comes from the clips on YouTube, sort of those funniest moments. And it's been really touching for me in the last couple of days to sort of get to know the more serious side of him, and that's been really fantastic. And well, it's made me appreciate sort of what we had while we had it a lot more. On sort of a different note, I'm a guy originally from Omaha, Nebraska, studying up at Syracuse right now, and boy, it has been a tough time to be supporting both of those programs. We've had our defensive coordinator at Syracuse, Tony White, left for Nebraska. We've had DeColdis Crawford, who was one of Nebraska's top recruits, obviously hit the transfer portal. Syracuse gave him an offer. Just today, we had Deuce Chestnut, one of our better cornerbacks, probably future NFL talent. He hit the portal as well. It's sort of expected he's going to be headed to Nebraska. And now we just had one more guy. I think one of the Nebraska defensive backs just committed to Syracuse. So what am I supposed to do here? Am I supposed to be cheering for both of them at the same time? It's really difficult. I don't know if I should, find a third team that maybe I should be rooting for at this point. But I feel like my teams are just cannibalizing each other here, guys.
When in doubt in college football, cheer for chaos because that's the only guaranteed product in this sport. And when you go in expecting chaos, whether your teams are cannibalizing each other or not, if you can go in and go, you know what, this is a sport of 18 to 22-year-olds trying to just push a leather ball down the field, and I'm here to enjoy every single moment of chaos that happens from that, you will enjoy your watching experience no matter who you're cheering for. So that would be my strongest piece of advice there more than anything else. Does not matter which team you are cheering for that is cannibalizing the other. Cheer for chaos and enjoy the chaos that you'll be watching in front of you.
No doubt, no doubt. If nothing else, I shouldn't have to learn too many new names. So that's something.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us, Andrew. That was great. Looks
Thanks.
like we're going to slowly start closing up, but we have one more person up here, 8675309. What's going on?
Oh, not much. Just want to talk about Leach a little more. I mean,
absolutely.
I was in Lubbock in the early 2000s, and you had him coming in 2000 after Spike Dykes, who Spike was a long time, tech football coach. He was kind of the country club guy, played golf at the Boosters. He was, around town. His family was there in town, so everybody knew him. And of course, Rick and Sonny were coaching with him, and then Leach came in, and Leach was just totally different, right? I mean, the administration hired him for the football coach that they thought he could be, but he had no interest in going to the country club or hanging out with boosters or, doing the things that you would typically expect a college football coach to do on the weekends or in the off season. And it was just a really interesting time. And then I guess a couple of years after that, we hired Bob Knight, and you had Bob Knight getting in salad bar fights with the chancellor at the local grocery store and just, all this stuff going on. It's just a really interesting and, dynamic time to be in Lubbock there, watching those two lead those respective programs. So he's going to be incredibly missed. Just an incredible offensive mind. I've seen a lot of stuff on this College Football Hall of Fame thing that he's like 3 games short of being eligible for admission there. So hopefully there's something that can be done on that end. But yeah, it's gonna be. I'll miss watching his teams play on Saturdays for sure.
That's definitely something, especially regarding the Hall of Fame, I know JD has felt strongly about as well. Early on when we began the show, that was his initial strong comment, and I know I'm speaking for you, JD, right there. One thing I forgot, I always forget that Bob Knight was there as well, like 2 strong personalities at Texas Tech at the same time, leading the 2 basketball and college football. So that was a very interesting time there. And yeah, absolutely, 2 people who were so different. And I never even thought about that transition from Coach Dykes to Leach and how different that must have been, because you're absolutely right. I mean, that you couldn't get 2 more different personalities there.
Yeah, pretty different. And y'all were right on that 2002 team. That was pretty incredible coaching staff that they had there. Just a great start to that coaching tree you hear so much about from Leach.
Absolutely. No kidding that, again, as we wrap this up, there's only going to be a 1 of 1 for Mike Leach. We're not going to have another Mike Leach coming into college football. We're not going to have another character who is going to revolutionize the game in the way that he did with the characteristics that he had. And, as much as Ralph said, and I firmly agree that, Mike Leach was by no means a perfect man. He had plenty of warts and flaws. But for a man to touch this sport that we love at this incredible, massive scale, it is exceptional to see the kind of legacy and impact that he's going to leave behind after passing away at age 61. And I would hope that, myself, Bobak, everybody else on this call, that we just have an opportunity to give a fraction to the people around us that Mike Leach gave to all of us as fans of this sport. So as a call to action for all of y'all, take in the words that Ross and Ralph both said tonight of be interesting, be interested in other people, connect with others, and find ways to make sure that you have good conversations with everybody that you get to interact with, because that's always going to be the way that you're going to be remembered best for a legacy, no matter what happens in whatever faction of life that you are in. If you are interesting and are interested in others, good things will happen to you. And for a man like Mike Leach to leave this plane, I hope that's a lesson that all of us learn from him. And, the Pirate now gets to watch those games in the coaching box in the sky, but he will be dearly missed on this plane. He will be dearly missed on the gridiron. And more than anything else, we will miss his anecdotes and his interest in other people.
Hey, I got one more thing to ask. I don't know if y'all have time, but on the Mississippi State, I've seen that they've started using the Jolly Roger on some of their logoing. Is that something they introduced when they hired Leach?
I would. Yeah. As Shaw just said, that's something that you get that when you bring in Leach. That's definitely part of what makes him such a charmer, which started back when it was Swing Your Sword, when he wrote the book and kind of leaned into that quite a bit. Well, JD put it really well. I don't think I have much more I can add to that, other than as someone who has also lost someone very close to me from a heart issue, and I know we don't specifically have exactly what happened to Coach Leach, but I just encourage all of you to be sure to check yourself regularly, especially as you get a little older. Like myself, I'm in my 40s. Go to your regular checkups. Make sure you're doing what you can to keep yourself as healthy as you can. But sometimes it just happens, and I'm not going to say it's perfect, but I just wish you all good life, long life, all of you out there, and again, our sympathies to Coach Leach's family and all of those he's touched, which is just an enormous number of people. And as we wrap up, I just wanted to thank all of you for listening, all of you who joined us to add to the conversation. It was wonderful to also hear from Ross Dellenger from SI and Ralph Russo from the AP. It's been a tough day for a lot of people, but let's remember and celebrate his life as a coach, as a developer of young men and other coaches, and moving this sport into an interesting era of offense. So on behalf of myself, Bob Ekayeri, on behalf of my co-host, JD, thanks again for joining us. Now I'm going to hang up and listen.